peak.
The latest data show another rise in COVID.
Hello and welcome to In the News Right Now.
Joining Leilani and myself this week, we have the owner of Camelot Castle, John Mappin.
Comedian Abby Roberts and broadcaster and political commentator Dominique Samuels.
And social media personality Charlotte Emma is also joining the panel.
As usual, we'll be covering a range of topics that are making the news this week.
Alex Jones told to pay $965 million in damages to Sandy Hook families.
Parents call for probe after Mermaids worker posts an explicit photo.
Government tried to rent a castle to put up illegal immigrants as 1,000 are arriving daily in the UK.
And finally, Defence Minister Lavrov says Russia is open to talks with the West. US dismisses comments as posturing.
Right, let's start with Alex Jones then. John, we'll start with you. What went through your head when you saw he had to pay $965 million in damages?
Well, the first thing is obviously it's a very excessive payment. But the first thing that came into my mind is if he is being fined that much for what he did, how much are the people that have been pushing the vaccine and that have harmed people with their words? Obviously a number of people have been harmed from this vaccine. What are they going to have to pay in reparations? And in a way, you could say it's a negative, but every cloud has a silver lining. And I think if I was one of the celebrities or news commentators, I'd be looking at that Sandy Hook, payment for Alex Jones, and I'd be very, very worried indeed that the tumbrils would be coming for me very shortly.
It is an insane amount of money. And when I looked at it, I saw quite a few people were putting on social media other things. One of them, I think it was Count Dankula, was saying that there was a company, an American company, I think, in India that polluted a water supply, killed 15,000 people, and they were ordered to pay half of what Alex Jones is meant to pay for words. It seems crazy. Dominique, in the mainstream media, I've seen people like Julie Hartley-Brewer, even J.K. Rowling celebrating this when it's like, but this sets a precedent that can come for you later. Does it surprise you that people that are supposedly pro-free speech are celebrating this?
No, it doesn't surprise me because I don't think they get that this is all part of sort of a wider issue. I think they just take each event at face value and really sort of trust the institutions that we've been told to trust our whole lives without actually realizing that if the COVID pandemic can happen, if so many authoritative bodies, people in positions of power can lie to you and abuse their power, it's very, very much possible that that same power is being used to silence people like Alex Jones. And I made this point on Twitter. I tweeted about it, and I said that you don't have to be an Alex Jones fan. I mean, I'm aware of some of his stuff, but I don't watch him religiously. You don't have to be an Alex Jones fan to understand that he is most definitely being made an example of because of the sheer, this is historical, the amount of money he's being demanded to pay for what we call conspiracy theories and misinformation. And that sets a very dangerous precedent going forward in regards to what sort of things people are allowed to say online. I personally believe that we should be able to say whatever conspiracy theories we like. I mean, Alex Jones isn't necessarily directly responsible for the things that his fans choose to do.
Yeah, that was part of it. I was thinking it was strange actually. The line they were saying that he said that Sandy Hook was questionable, and if you actually look at some of the evidence, it is questionable. Like Robbie Parker, the father of one of the children, coming into the press conference the day after his child shot dead, and he's laughing and saying, "Are we ready to get started?" And then he gets into character. Now, whatever happened with Sandy Hook, I don't know. I wasn't there, but you should be allowed to question that because that's just bizarre.
Exactly, and you're just they're speaking about it, aren't they? He was speaking about what he felt about it. He didn't tell his fans or his followers to go out and do the things that they did. And if they went and did something awful, which apparently they did do, I heard they kind of messed up the graves of one of the children, then why aren't they being held responsible for their actions rather than taking it back to Alex Jones, who never once said go out and do anything? Abby, I see you're nodding your head. What do you think about it all? Because you're a very outspoken person. Do you think this is, making Alex an example to stop people from speaking about how they feel about, anything?
Yeah, I mean, like Dominique, I would have put something on Twitter, but they've banned me from Twitter. I tried to get back on with another account and then a third account, and I was banned with that as well. So there's something very, very dangerous happening. And Alex Jones is one example. We saw it after the murder of George Floyd, with Biden influencing the trial of Derek Chauvin, and the question people have to, and again, I was absolutely targeted when I even suggested that the American justice system was in trouble because the trial had been influenced. And my question was, the point I put was, what would happen if Derek Chauvin, sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, had been a black police officer? Because that's the thing. The justice should be absolutely blind, for it to be fair. So what we're seeing is the collapse of the American justice system. Sorry, there aren't many jokes in this, but it's really it's really chilling. It's chilling what's happening. And Biden is as authoritarian. People go, oh, Putin, he's awful. Yeah. Putin has it as his bad point, as we know. Biden is crushing America under his woke authoritarian fist, and it needs to end.
No, I mean, Charlotte, you had your Twitter deleted, didn't you?
I've been suspended maybe for a week max a few times, but for some reason I'm still there.
Oh, I'm glad you are, because it entertains me, your Twitter, I must admit.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't know if the writing's on the wall anytime soon, but yeah, I guess it's just another attack on free speech, isn't it? On the journey of me seeking truth from the last few years, like Sandy Hook was one of the main things that woke me up, alongside videos of your dad, videos of Alex Jones, and it sets a precedent of you're not able to question. We all know there's false flags. We know there's such things as crisis actors. There are a lot of questions around Sandy Hook specifically. There's a book by a guy called Jim Fetzer, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, and he addresses quite a few points in that. So highly recommended you look at that. But again, look at Justice Smollett, for example. That was a false flag in itself. It didn't go to plan for them. Don't know what happened there, but these things happen. Historically, they've happened, and so not being able to question them is quite scary.
Even just.
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
All right, yeah. I was just gonna say, even just looking at this, sort of, taking the quote unquote conspiracy theories, putting them to the side. The West readily says that Russia tries to put in place false flag attacks. It says that Russia does a lot of these things to do with crisis actors and false flag attacks and all this stuff. So I don't understand how the very idea that the West could also be capable of things like this is just so unfathomable to some people. It genuinely doesn't make sense to me if we can accept that the other side does it.
100%.
Exactly. It's a really good point. I do wonder though, with the amount that they've fined him, that it's kind of come out into the open a bit just how much of a sham trial it was. So if they'd have fined him, say, I don't know, 20 million quid. I don't know how much money he's got, but I would imagine 20 million quid would probably clean him out. I mean, I don't think, he's he's not Bill Gates. So they could do that and clean him out, and people might have a little bit of a kind of, maybe they deserve it, but $1 billion.
Well, this is what baffles me. It baffles me. It's so much money, and he's actually not responsible for the death of anybody. Someone can say they were harmed mentally by what they saw on the internet. They can always turn off, but no one was killed because of what he said or any actions he's ever taken. And there are so many cases around the world where there are people that get less for war crimes.
Yeah. It's extraordinary.
I think
you shouldn't be fining anybody for free speech. You should be fining Big Pharma a lot of money.
Yeah, I think
for the people that they've killed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, what
I
this
think.
is really about, in my sorry, I keep speaking, but I was just gonna say, one thing this is really about, in my view, is to smash Alex Jones's business model. Because despite the fact that he's way, outside of the mainstream, he's a pretty wealthy guy and his show does pretty well. And I think he said this as well. What this is intended to do is basically just to destroy any possibility of him really broadcasting again. Really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, what he did is he started to expose the fact that these school shootings have at their root psychiatric drugs. And once you start to expose the income stream of the psychopharmaceutical complex, the people that are manufacturing these drugs that they give to children, such as Ritalin and stuff like that, and he has been in the vanguard of exposing that. And so I think he really scared those that are profiting at Big Pharma.
That's a really good point, John. You've been speaking a lot about psychiatric drugs and school shootings and the mental effect that these mind-altering drugs actually have on kids that were massively prescribed in America at the moment.
Well, that is the common denominator of all school shootings. If you go back and you look at it, every single one of these shooters has been put on one of these, what they call serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or the psychiatric drugs. And of course, this is the hidden root of much of the, dismay and insanity that we witness in the world. I often say, if you start digging when you get around something that is evil, you will always eventually run into a psychiatrist, generally handing out psychiatric drugs. I mean, in the Ukraine right now, the Ukrainian soldiers are all being put onto Captagon, which is a mix of Ritalin and crystal meth. So at the root of these things, you will find the psychiatrist at play.
Well, look at Sage.
Yeah,
Full of psychiatrists.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's interesting because actually
full of sage advice.
It leads on to our next story in terms of the drugging of kids, because, and also free speech, because the whole transgender issue is an absolute don't go there, don't talk about that because you get deleted. People are terrified. This news story: parents call for probe after Mermaids worker posts explicit photo. I was the least shocked person ever, because for me, if you've got an organisation that is sending chest binders to kids behind their parents' backs, that kind of sort of mentality is going to attract people that ain't quite right, in my view.
Absolutely. And there was a paedophile supporter, or he went to speak at a paedophile support group, I should say, that was a trustee of the Mermaids organisation. So, yeah, what do you think about this? Who should we go to? Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, again, I wasn't surprised at all by this. I'm sure that the Mermaids charity was set up with the best of intentions, but like most charities that we've seen, there's infiltrators and there's a lot of depravity, within the LGBTQ plus community that we've seen, and it's like a slippery slope. I saw a good meme this weekend, and it started off with, two gay men saying, "Please bake us a cake," and it goes to insisting on the pronouns, and then it goes to drag queens dancing for money in front of children, the children, handing them $1 bills and things. And it's just a worrying, you can just see where it's all going, can't you? And so, yeah, not surprised in the slightest.
No, it's interesting actually, because we had Gays Against Groomers on the show probably about a month and a half ago, and she was making a really good point. Like, she was saying that actually the LGBTQ community, which is an annoying term as if everyone fits within a community, but just for the sake of argument, like that community is actually kind of less accepted now than it was 10 years ago, because of these people, these fringe people that are just, grooming basically, that are just absolutely insane. And so then the public associate that behaviour with them as a group, which, is she was saying that's actually dangerous, and she thinks that a lot of people within that community need to speak up for their own benefit, basically, because actually, they're being tarred with that brush. What do you think about that, Abby, when you see these kind of stories breaking?
Oh God, I just literally just put my head in my hands and think, I mean, it's clown world. I know people use that, don't they, a lot, the phrase clown world, but it's just, kids, We want kids read Goldilocks, not Goldicocks. I genuinely fear. I don't. When children, little babies, are being read fairy tales, the person reading it should not be a man wearing a leather skirt and fishnets and size 12 shoes. What has that got to do with, unless of course it's a scary story and you're meant to be terrifying children, which we're not meant to be. Adults are meant to be safeguarding kids. So Mermaids, as I put, sorry, this is a bit of a dad joke, Mermaids hasn't got a leg to stand on. It's a tail. Sorry, anyone who's slow, because it is Monday morning. Thanks for laughing.
Dominique, you made a few tweets back at the start about mermaids and the chest binders against, parents' consent. What do you make of the new revelations that are coming out about them?
Well, again, I'm not really surprised because there does seem to be a sexualized undercurrent at the root of this movement. And I think that people need to start being comfortable and honest, differentiating between, a sexual orientation and a fetish. And what we found here, this guy, Darren Muse, he was Mermaids, I think social media manager or something like that, digital engagement officer he was. And he was found to have been posting pictures on Instagram, pictures of him wearing a short skirt, sort of alluding to this idea of being a young schoolgirl. And that is clearly a fetish that a lot of these people have. And for some reason, not going to start making any bold claims here, but for some reason, these very same types of people seem to be attracted to organisations that want to push a sexual and gender ideology onto children. Now, there is a clear connection here. We've seen it over and over again. And I think people need to be honest. There's a difference between having a sexual orientation and just being a pervert. And being honest about that is how you actually protect children. There are people out there, a lot of them men, that are sexually aroused by the idea of wearing women's clothing. That does not mean they're transgender. It means they're a pervert with a fetish.
John, as a dad, like, what do you... It's a weird thing, because for me, I've got two daughters, and I look at it and I think, I was quite a feminine lad, to be fair. I had long blonde hair, believe it or not, and I had nail varnish and eyeliner and all that sort of stuff. Not because I thought I was a girl. I wanted to be Kurt Cobain, basically. But my sister as well, she played football, and when she would play football with us, like, her nickname was the Tank, right? Because she would just go straight through people, right? But she was still a woman. And no, you don't tend to see tomboys. I mean, what do you think about that, John? That there was almost that kind of way that if someone is quite, not masculine, but they're kind of, that's how they present themselves as a girl, then all of a sudden, well, you must be transgender then.
Well, I mean, I think if we all remember the famous five, where Georgina used to, like to dress like a boy, and that was, totally normal, and people sort of accepted this. I think what's happened is in the late 60s and early 70s, the psychological or psychiatric industrial complex, the guys that are manufacturing these drugs, see in the LGBT movement a sort of they're fighting this is a way of them exporting further drugs into the community. And what has been particularly upsetting to me is how our royal family has been hijacked by psychiatry, and how Harry and even the Princess of Wales has been used by these mental health charities, which are really a front to accelerate the speed at which drugs move into our society. And I think Abby and Lady Burnley are absolutely correct, is that, this is an awful situation. But I think if one looks at the root of it and you say, what is going to happen to these kids? These kids are going to end up on drugs, and they are going to end up in quite a muddle. And so it's simply a way of increasing drug sales. And I think that's where one has to look. And I think that's what Alex Jones exposed. And I think that the Mermaids are way down the food chain on this. But as Dominique said, it's completely expected.
And I've heard a theory as well that there's a lot of, well, there seem to be a few paedophiles or groomers trying to, sway children towards puberty blockers and what have you. And someone made a good point that if you do that with kids, well, when they get to 16, 17, 18, they haven't developed the body of a mature person, and therefore it actually makes it easier for paedophiles because they can go, well, hold on a minute, this person might look like a child, but actually they're overage, so therefore it's all fair game. So,
yeah, it's a really good
what do you
point.
think?
Terrifying.
Do you think that could be a possibility as well?
Well, I tell you what I do think is that I think the lawsuits that children who have been sort of coerced into puberty blockers and have changed their sex. I mean, imagine if you for want of a better word, had your bits lopped off, and then all of a sudden you realized, well, that was a mistake, but you made that mistake because your teachers and because the people that were part of these various different groups that are pushing it. I think this is going to be one of the largest, well, I mean, there's all sorts of class action lawsuits that are overdue, but it's a terrible, terrible thing to encourage this in a child, and there are already the most horrendous stories. And of course, as I say, at the root of it is you will find a psychiatrist pushing. I forget the name. I was just trying to look up the name of the psychiatrist that basically designed this sexualization of America. That's the one. You're absolutely
Kinsey,
right.
yeah.
You're very, very, very well done. That's right. Absolutely correct. And this fellow, what we're witnessing now. I can't remember when he wrote that, but
in the 50s, yeah.
In the 50s, it's a straight implementation of Kinsey, and it's horrendous, and it is designed to sell drugs, and even Help for Heroes, which is supposed to help veterans with PTSD. What help do they actually get? Well, they get put onto psychiatric drugs, and so the icons of our age, other than those present here, of course, are on the whole quite dedicated to pushing this agenda, and it actually starts with our royal family, and they have been hijacked as well, and they are pushing these mental health charities, which ultimately simply end up with more drugs being sold.
It's amazing how many things link back to Big Pharma and how many things they're all tied together.
Do you know something? I was thinking the other day, I don't know what your view is on this, that that basically most of America is now smoking marijuana. I mean, very, very strong skunk. Well, I don't remember any revolution being fought where people are stoned out of their heads, because who's going to start a revolution when they got the munchies?
Well,
not many people. I'm just going to leave that open to the floor.
No, well, it's the same with lithium in the water and things like that, and things that dumb people down. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Well, Woodstock was actually a CIA trial of civilian use of LSD, and the CIA produced the LSD for that and gave it to a fellow called Ginsberg, who distributed it at Woodstock. And that, the CIA wanted to see what would happen if you put LSD into the water supply. But
at least LSD is kind of fun.
Well, it's what eating's quiet. Fun? Eating lots and lots of
Rice Krispie cakes.
Lilani quickly comes in there.
I think these things are fun. But...
No, I that's not me. I'm just saying eating up.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to our next story then. Obviously, we've just heard from you, John, but we have to start with you on this one because it's your castle. Government tried to rent a castle to put up illegal immigrants as 1,000 are arriving daily in the country. Can you tell us about that, John?
Well, I thought it was a joke at first, but we had a call in reception, and this agency of the government had called up and they said, listen, we'll give you full occupancy for 12 months at a very, very fair rate. And, and a rolling contract. And I mean, how often do you get a call like that? So, of course, I called the person myself. And sure enough, this was an attempt to install asylum seekers into the little countryside village of Tintagel and effectively turn Camelot Castle in England into a home for the various different government guests that the government seems to be extremely keen to welcome over our channel and so on and so forth. So I actually had a long conversation with the gentleman who himself was fine, and he was just simply doing his job. But I was astounded by it, and a couple of things that really were shocking was that, number one, I said, well, what happens if they trash the place? Because Camelot Castle is a historic, it's sort of like an everyman's Downton Abbey, you know. And anybody can stay, but it's very historic and beautiful. And I thought, well, what if they trash the place? They said, oh, not to worry. After a year, you know, you just take photographs before and after, and the government will pay for all of that repair at the you know, government's expense. So I said, well, hang on a second, that's not the government's expense. That's the taxpayers' money. And, you know, I don't know many taxpayers that fancy paying for the restoration of Camelot Castle. You know, after a bunch of, you know, asylum seekers have been in here for a year. Second thing I said, well, what about my staff? You're not going to need the same staffing levels, clearly. No, don't worry. You can let them go. Just who can clean the hotel once a week. Now, you know, in a little country village like this, I've got elderly staff who've been with the family for years, over a decade, many of them. And what are they going to do? You know, somebody's work is their life. It's so important. And the callous way with which this was suggested. And so I'm afraid I took out Excalibur and I put it where, you know, where the sun doesn't shine. Particular deal. And, you know, what can I say? I decided to go public on it because what I actually found out is this is going on up and down the country. And what we're looking at here, Gareth, is cultural destruction. And, you know, I have no problem at all with bona fide asylum seekers. What I have a serious problem with is people gaming the system. And, you know, there is no question right now that the government is being very weak. My personal position is I would use the Royal Navy and I would defend the island because I consider this to be an invasion.
How much money is that costing the taxpayer? It's insane,
I think it's about 5 billion.
5 million
I think
a
it's
day,
about
isn't
5
it?
billion. It's about, I don't know the exact figure. Someone better at maths than me can work it out. But the amount that they offered us for this hotel, you know, I'm not going to say the exact figure, but you can calculate it. It's full occupancy, 65 rooms for a year. So, I mean, it's horrendous, and it's such a waste of taxpayers' money. And here's the extraordinary thing. This week, there's a meeting in Tintagel because the visitor centre can't afford to run itself. And there isn't even enough money to pay for somebody to run the public restroom facilities. And so the government is willing to spend that money on asylum seekers in the village of Tintagel, but they're not willing to subsidise the local tourist industry here, which frankly could do with a boost because it got very stressed. You know, a lot of people came to Cornwall during after the lockdown. So, you know, it's just an extraordinary misapplication of money, and the wastage is unbelievable. And I think the government still hasn't answered to it or said what it is that they're going to do. So keep communicating about it.
Dominique, how do you feel about this? Because there have been a lot of places similar to Camelot Castle, like Grade 2 listed buildings, beautiful hotels, exclusive country homes that have been taken over, and the government is spending their money on them.
Yeah, I heard you say the figure. It's minimum about 5 million a day that we're spending, but I think that we're probably spending a lot more than that. I got a message from a follower not long ago that told me that Serco, the same company that was used to, you know, implement COVID track and trace, Serco, is also buying up buildings to act as a landlord for them to actually house asylum seekers in there. And this has been done in a lot of villages, in a lot of towns, completely transforming these villages and towns for the worst, whilst, as John said, taxpayers are being tasked with footing the bill. And I mean, we've seen the kind of people that are actually coming in, people from Albania. From the photos, a lot of these people are grown, muscular, very serious looking men, some would even say they resemble soldiers, or people that have been in prison at least. And my question is, what are they actually here for? Is there a criminal network that that they're recruiting for? Does it involve drugs? And if so, why does the government and why does our border force seem to have such a lax attitude towards it? My personal suspicion, and this is just my opinion, that there are people that have vested interests in this, people that are making a lot of money. Maybe it's tied to the drug industry, I don't know, but I think there's a reason why so many floods of young, muscular, fighting-age men are being brought into this country, and it's got nothing to do with asylum at all. That's just rubbish.
Abby, what do you think? I've seen these pictures as well when they're dressed in like North Face jackets. We've got a cost of lockdown living crisis here in England, and we've got English and Britain, and we've got British people who can't afford to heat their homes and feed their families. But the government finds money for these guys, because there are so many guys, and again, dressed more nicely than you see a lot of British people.
Yeah, exactly. And as Dominique says, they're all muscular men. Where are the women and girls, guys? Where are the children, female children coming over? Oh, I wonder, could it be because these people are, and this is the thing, with the numbers that are growing, what we're basically going to see is our culture destroyed, the British culture destroyed, and successive governments have allowed this. Not just this one, even though it's been in power for 12 years, way before that, where they just all have been looking in the other direction. So I just sort of think, people need to be intolerant of intolerant ideas now, which is like, because one day soon we're going to wake up and it'll be like, oh, our country is just like, is either underwater or is Iran, essentially. Do we want that? No, I don't.
You can tell it's definitely being done intentionally, though. If you try and get anything out of the government that it didn't want to give you, no chance, you wouldn't get anything. And it makes me think back as well. So, like the wars in the Middle East, where we would just chuck in, our own soldiers in those points, but also money to fund wars that was obviously going to cause an influx of immigrants. And it feels like they're doing exactly the same thing in Ukraine. Because like you say, people can't afford to eat, they can't afford to heat their homes, but we can find money to rent out castles, and we can find money to fund a cross-dressing comedian to poke a bear. That's fine. And it makes me think, and this is intentional. It's obviously intentional. And also the destruction of British culture is intentional in lots of other ways. I'm thinking like lockdowns. Lockdowns have killed the pub. Is there anything more British than going to the pub and having a chat? And, I just moved in June to a little village in Derbyshire. When I got the house, there was 3 pubs in the village. By the time we moved in, it was only about 3 months later, there's not one single pub. They've all gone. They've all closed down. Which is quite gutting because I like a pint. But
we're seeing the erosion of culture, of our culture, and it's deadly serious.
It is, yeah. And I think, what's it like for you, Charlotte? Because you're, up in the north of England, where I think, you've kind of probably in the north, you've kind of got more of your culture left. Whereas you go into the south, it's all kind of, it's just a bit posh. Whereas, up north, you kind of have a bit more kind of, this is how we do things. Are you seeing it change around your way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's always been, if you go to the city, you can see the multiculturalism. But yeah, it is. There are more and more different people here. Like I live in a sleepy village in North Yorkshire at the minute. And yeah, things do feel quite different. In fact, the other day I was walking into town, and I was on the phone, and some guy, I don't know where he was from, almost ran after me. Now I tried to go, no, that's so weird. That never happens. But yeah, I think I'm very much of the opinion that it's all intentional and not an accident. And I think there's 3 words that we haven't mentioned yet, which if you Wikipedia them, it'll be far-right conspiracy theory, but the Kalergi plan. And I think that's it's a covert scheme to destroy Europe from within. And of the understanding that politicians are aware of it, they just don't speak about it. And so it angers me a bit when you see all these refugees welcome signs, all these do-gooders holding those, when they don't actually question it. And I think a lot of this, you know, you're going to be deemed racist if you even question it, and
That's what I was going to ask.
problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
It's
I'm
not
saying.
a left or-
Dominique, have you felt that, like, when you've spoken out about it, about you know, illegal immigrants coming over, have you felt there's been name calling and stuff around it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not white, so when people see me being critical of immigration in general, not just illegal immigration, because I have always been of the belief that we should be reducing immigration, whether illegal or legal. I think we need to put a bit of a stop to it now and actually focus on people that are living here already, and that has nothing to do with skin colour. It's about being British, a British citizen, most of the time being born here. And I think that's what the government is deliberately not prioritising, because this issue has been brewing for years. I remember I supported leaving the European Union. Immigration was a problem. People were saying that we need to start investing in the skills of the people that already live here. Fast forward now, that problem is greater than ever, and our government are still suggesting that the answer may be importing more foreign labour. And look, it doesn't make me a racist or a traitor to have that opinion, because, you know, not that I need to justify it, but I was born here, my mum was born here, my dad was born here, my grandma was born here. You know, I have very strong roots in Britain, and the truth is that when you have large influxes of people that were not born here, that do not share the same culture, when you let all of these people in en masse, you are going to see segregation on racial and cultural lines, and you're going to see a clash of cultures where people, for example, people that do come from the Islamic community, they have quite archaic attitudes towards women. There is a problem with group gang rape. I mean, let's just be honest. Yeah. And different cultural things that do differentiate us from people from other countries. And when you flood these sorts of people into our public sector, you've got language barriers, you've got cultural barriers. You know, British people, we're quite sarcastic. We like to make conversation. I mean, some cultures may not necessarily understand that, and that's how social cohesion sort of breaks down. Especially when you're telling the people that can actually see what's happening right before their eyes that they're racist. It's gaslighting, and the problem isn't going to go away. It's only going to grow.
Yeah, I feel as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. I was just going to quickly say, when people say, "Look, there's all these cultures coming in. This is great, isn't it? It's multiculturalism. It's a celebration of all these different cultures." It's like, well, actually, it's not, because it's like having a dish. If you chuck so many ingredients in the end, it just becomes nothing. There is no culture.
Exactly.
It's just
exactly.
And we saw
you need
it in Leicester,
the dominant
didn't we?
culture.
We saw it in Leicester with the Hindus and the Muslims fighting each other.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my mum actually did come over from the Philippines, but she has ingrained herself in British culture to the point where some of my friends like, gosh, your mum's more British than I am, you know, because she's tried to make sure she's come over here because she wanted to live in Britain. And so obviously she has ingrained herself within like British culture.
Yeah. I mean, they gaslit us with that as well, talking about it was a fighting over a cricket match. It's like, yeah, all that was about a cricket match, nothing to do with, you know, cultural disagreements and issues between the two that have come back for goodness knows how many decades and hundreds of years probably. Sorry, John, I cut you off there, mate, as well.
No, I'm just saying that, you know, it is cultural destruction. If you take 100 asylum seekers and you place them into a little village of Tintagel, which has a population of 1,500 people, of course it's going to change the landscape. There is a town, the letters that I've been receiving over the last week here, and the emails are extraordinary. And the stories that I'm hearing about, in fact, Camborne, which is a little town in Cornwall. I had a letter saying that a hotel there had taken on people, and that some of those people had now absconded the facility, and they've been loitering around the schools. And you know, the mothers there are actually now terrified for their children. And I think, you know, without casting aspersions, probably for good reason. You know, there is a plan, and it is a deliberate plan to destroy the culture. And it's time that people woke up and started to call this plan out and use examples like this. I think the great thing about the Camelot Castle example is people look at Camelot, it's a very everyman concept, and people can understand it, and they go, hang on, this is really ridiculous. And I think it's highlighted the issue, but it's a very deep issue, and its roots are very sinister.
Absolutely. Moving on then to Ukraine, because it all ties in, because the more you keep a war going in Europe, the more refugees you're going to create, and the problem will just carry on. Lavrov, who is the Russian defense minister, I believe, he comes out and says, because you messaged in the group this, didn't you?
Yeah.
Like he said he's open to talks with the West, and immediately the US just dismisses it. And it's like, okay, so we're led to believe there's all these people being killed. Suddenly one of the sides is saying, like, we're open to talking. Right, okay, peace talks then. Okay, that would be my reaction.
Right.
Okay, right, let's do this. But instead it's like, no. That's extraordinary, isn't it? So what do you think about this, Abby, when you look at Ukraine and Zelensky saying we demand more money and all this madness?
He's just an absolute. It's funny, you know, when you said cross-dressing comedian, poking about. I thought you were talking about Eddie Izzard for a second. Because that's going to be the next bloody thing, isn't it? I tell you what, it's going to be Eddie Izzard, isn't it? Flying to you. That's going to be the thing, isn't it? It's like seeing them the two together, dressed as women. I mean, that would be the ultimate clown world. I think what's happened is absolutely disgraceful. I've seen people. This has been going on a long time now, as many people on this panel will know. The situation in Ukraine since 2014, dreadful. I mean, the governments in Ukraine are, Putin's, attacked, but bloody hell, they've had terrible censorship from the guy before Zelensky and Zelensky. I think he's closed down like 3 radio stations. So this guy is not some JFK. He's not some sort of like, hey guys, let's just all go forward and and be a great free thinking country. He's not at all. And of course he's got America. There's lots of different interests there. So I think when people, I can't remember who it was now, but I remember someone on Question Time when this all started, saying that Putin. It was in danger of basically invading Eastern Europe. So after Ukraine, going after Poland and Czechoslovakia like Hitler, absolutely ridiculous. So what's happening is they're trying to prolong this war for their own interest. It's a proxy war, and they need to get round a table with the Russians. Otherwise, and sending men. I saw there was a guy from Northern Ireland, Rory. I'm sorry, I forget his surname. He died. He went over, volunteer, sent by, was it Liz Truss, silly cow, who sent them all. It said you've got to go and fight on behalf of Ukraine. They've got blood on their hands because those men should not be going over there fighting for Ukraine.
Absolutely, Dominique, you said this from the start. I remember seeing it on social media. Why is everyone escalating? Sorry, why the Brits and the Americans escalating everything? Why is no one trying to negotiate or have peace talks? You were actually name called, surprise, surprise, just like with COVID, Putin sympathizer or apologist for saying, can we just have some peace? What do you make of it?
Yeah, this whole thing has been so bloody bizarre. When it first started, this whole war thing, I wasn't convinced right from the beginning. There was just something about how sort of robotically everyone was like, must support Zelensky, like just robots. And I just thought it was really odd, and it reminded me of COVID. And now everyone, the left, the right, broadcast, print, from Good Morning Britain to who's sort of right wing, to Talk TV, that's supposed to be sort of right wing. They all had the same opinion on this, and that didn't seem right to me. And like you said, we are not interested in peace, and I think it's time to just be honest about that now. People are making out like Putin is just this unhinged madman that just flew into Ukraine for no reason whatsoever. That isn't true. And anyone who's tried to say, well, actually, America does have a role to play here, actually it might be possible that America is using Ukraine as a proxy to fight war with Russia. You know, that is perfectly plausible, but in the eyes of the brainwashed and the people that are so engaged with the likes of the BBC, this is all just Putin's fault. So what that does is that entrenches a public support for this war, and my prediction will be that this will be a long war, whether we like it or not, because the ultimate aim is to fundamentally change Western society, but to also fundamentally change the way we actually produce our own energy. Meanwhile, whether deliberate or not, I personally think it's deliberate. Meanwhile, we are basically propping up China and paying China to overtake us. So by probably the end of the 2020s, what you'll see is China officially as the world superpower, and that will all be down to the West supporting a futile war that Ukraine will not win. Let's just be honest about that. Ukraine are not going to win this war.
Well, this is the thing, John, you've always said as well, talk is the only way through. So it's either going to, you either have to talk or you have to just go all out. And how do you feel about the US just dismissing comments for talk now?
Well, I think what we have to accept, this war was long planned by the United States and sadly by our own country. And, of course, the really frustrating thing for America was the fact that Trump got elected in 2016, and this engagement in the Ukraine was postponed for 4 years. And one of the reasons why all the various different things were done to remove Trump from the White House was so that this could occur. Probably some of the best work on it is Oliver Stone's documentary, Ukraine on Fire. If you look at the work of Victoria Nuland, and essentially what happened is that the Ukraine has had a long history and a more than a flirtation with Nazi philosophy, which goes back a very long time, and the covert forces in the world worked out that these could be used and strengthened in order to cause the collapse, really, of the Ukraine and the creation of the Ukraine as a sort of a proxy state. So the full story of that is very, very interesting. And I think many of people are aware of that now, and that we really are the hidden third party. The instigator, the creators of a fifth column within that area of the world. There is one point, though, that I think should be made very clear. President Putin has been actually restraining the hardliners in Russia. And there is this idea that, the solution to this is to get rid of Putin. What I can tell you on very good authority is that he would be replaced by somebody that would have already used considerably more severe measures and would not in any way have tolerated or been as patient with the West's involvement. And I think if one reads Lavrov's recent announcement, these people really are not idiots. They are not insane in any way. They are extremely rational and have been extremely measured. My own view is that the Russian Federation had no choice but to commence the military operation. And what is also very important to realize is that Putin is acting on the advice of his generals. He is not we have this idea that, he sort of micromanages every level of society in Russia, and anything that happens in Russia is down to Putin. Well, that just isn't the way life there works. So those are two things that I would really sincerely advise our leaders to consider. Is number one, we are blessed that Putin is still there, because if he were removed, the replacement would not be at all appetizing for the West. And number two, of course, as Liani correctly says, the only route out of this is to get around the table and communicate. And one other point I would make is if you look at history, you never win by funding Nazis. And sadly, what our government has been doing is arming, training, and funding Nazi units in the Ukraine. And it should stop immediately.
I remember when they said that Putin invaded because he had long COVID. And it had made him insane. Didn't you remember that? That was actually the mainstream.
Absolutely. The other thing that is quite shocking to me is if you think about it, do you remember when the Iraq war kicked off and the marches and the peace marches? I remember we did even a beacon lighting ceremony here, and there was huge, I think it was the largest march in the history.
Yeah.
What has happened to the British people that we are now so tolerant of funding really a completely unjust military operation in the Ukraine? Where are our peacemakers? Where are the people? Where are, well, of course, Anthony Wedgwood Benn has died, but where are the Jeremy Corbyns and the people who spoke out so gallantly against the war? Why has there not been a Stop the War march in London? I mean,
I think it's because I think this is about much more than just sort of a proxy war. I think it's an information war as well. And I've noticed that even if you go onto Google, I've tried to start using other search engines, but even just going onto Google, you literally cannot find any alternative view on the war that's going on right now, just like you can't really find any alternative view on COVID. You could scroll right down to Google, press page 11 to try and find something, but our information is very, very tightly controlled. So to be honest, I can't even really blame the people that are like Slav Ukraini, because they're really only seeing a very selected, controlled bits of information. The vast majority of the people in this country do not go out of their way to find information. They trust the BBC, they trust Sky, they trust all of these media networks. So can you really blame people for being so blind to this? Because I can imagine right about where Iraq was going on, there was probably a lot more conflicting information that people could see, but now there just isn't in the aftermath of COVID.
No. Well, this is the thing.
And also, I just wanted to say as well that, but I think as far as marching goes, I think you'll find that a lot of the British public are so exhausted from marching all of last year against our own tyrannical government. That's also what we've had. We're exhausted. By it all.
And even if you do march, it won't get covered. I mean, there's marches going all around Europe. They'll
say it's a Putin sympathiser march. It's the march of the Putin sympathisers. And I mean,
there's Abby Roberts again, Putin's mouthpiece.
Charlotte, do you see the censorship as well? Because right away they cut off Russia Today, didn't they? That was it.
Sputnik went.
No more Sputnik. No more Russia Today. You couldn't. It wasn't aired on TV anymore. Very hard to find. Do you think it's another case where people are being told what they must think about something?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw it with COVID. It goes hand in hand, doesn't it? And I must say, Lilani, when all this kicked off a few months ago, you were like, oh my God, what's going on here? And I'm so impressed by how you've educated yourself and are able to orate about this, because I am still like, I don't know the history of Crimea. I wouldn't be able to, be a good authority on speaking about it. But I guess you can see that all is not what it seems. And Putin was demonized for the last few years, especially by the Democratic Party in America. We all know that Donald Trump wasn't, in Putin's pocket. And I mean, I've lost count about how many times I've been called a Russian bot. And I guess all you lot too.
Yeah. When you were saying about the kind of the marching, it's an interesting point actually, because I was thinking generally the left would be, as in the old genuine left, would be the ones that were anti-war and stuff. And so I do wonder whether they kind of, by linking the Russian money to the Tories, as they have done for sort of 15 years or more now, that by doing that, they've kind of almost got the left to sort of support anyone but Russia. Because actually if I support Russia, then I'm, by proxy supporting the Tories. Another thing you said, Dominique, as well, which I found interesting, you were talking about making China a superpower. And when I think back to kind of like America being the superpower, when America became the superpower, it exported itself all over the world. And all of a sudden we had McDonald's, fries, and all this kind of, rock and roll and all that sort of stuff. And so I think by making China the superpower, then what are they exporting from China? And it's basically what we've had for the last 3 years. And now with Jeremy Hunt coming in, are we going to see even more of that here now?
Yeah, that's the thing. I remember when, obviously I did politics and international relations for my degree. So I was looking at, the political economy, how the global economy has shifted from one of sort of, Russia versus America to it being American hegemony. And that was presented to me as it being really quite transparent. America was very transparently exporting its values, exporting its companies, and all was well, it's free market capitalism. But now I'm actually starting to question that, and I'm thinking, well, was it as transparent? Because we can see it with China. China has been embedding itself, its companies, its people into Western society 4 years now in what I would deem a very long-term plan and long-term strategy. People, especially those that are well-versed on international relations, have been warning about China for so long now. Even American generals, before the war in Ukraine actually commenced, they said that this war in Ukraine would not actually impact Russia very much. I was saying this from the beginning, I'm going to shout it down. All it would do is push Russia into the arms of China. And what have we seen? China is buying excesses of Russian energy at a discount. So really, you are pushing the two of them together. And what's happening is China's economy has been allowed to grow astronomically by stealing American intellectual property, stealing a lot of the technology that these companies use, which is why America is so established economically. And really, Donald Trump tried to call this out with the trade war, was shouted down, was made out to be crazy. But by the end of this war, I predict that China will be in a much better place economically. We've sort of exported their ideals in terms of the digital ID, which is basically going to be a social credit system for the West. And we exported their ideas in terms of the Chinese-style lockdowns. So it's already happening. And the scary thing is how many of the average people aren't actually aware of what's going on.
No, it's been going on for some time as well. Like even if you look into the kind of the electric cars and all that sort of stuff, the batteries for that generally are coming from Africa, from slave labour, by the way. But also, China has been buying up large swathes of Africa for like the last 20 years. China owns Australia's water supply. People don't.
I mean, especially even with the One Belt, One Road initiative, the Silk Road that China's trying to put in place in countries like Pakistan, going through Africa. Basically, the One Belt, One Road initiative will actually connect to Europe. I think it connects to Europe already. This has just been allowed to go on. Meanwhile, we're being fed talking points about China and their carbon emissions, which obviously is true, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. China are propping themselves up to be A, self-sufficient, and for B, the rest of the world to be really relying on China going forward. Especially now we rely on them for this renewable energy thing. We even get bloody solar panels from China as well, which is absolutely hilarious.
Absolutely.
Bill Gates has just gone over there and tried to set up deals to get medication for Africa and stuff from China. Like, why would you want to depend on China?
No, I remember the days when all you got from China was like frisbees and things like that. But,
yeah. I mean, basically, we've got bicycles, masks, and communism in this country. We're China, aren't we? I mean, it's on. And there's a video of Jeremy Hunt. I've nearly said the wrong Hunt then, from last year, where he's actually saying in an interview that when his sister came back to Beijing, she lives in Beijing, from this country during 2020, she was escorted from the airport back to her house and they sealed the door. And Jeremy Hunt was going, I'm not suggesting that we go that far in this country. And I thought, yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. You're putting,
wow.
and so that man, mark my words, he's trying to get into the top job, and then it's over.
Yeah,
we're
he's got the
well
dead
and
eyes.
truly in.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's an absolute crazy eyes.
So that brings us to the limit of what we can discuss this week on YouTube. If you want to continue watching where we discuss Pfizer's recent admission, then please go to iconic.com. Thank you, and thank you all at home. If you want to contribute to any of the discussion, please leave a comment in the comment section below.
Thank you to John, Abby, Dominique and Charlotte.
We'll see you all next week.